What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and we've been doing this for a little bit. All right, 2-3 years, which means we've been accumulating dynasty teams from Patreon leagues, from analyst leagues. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, all right, especially in the offseason, Super Bowl wraps up. I get distracted, all right? We're doing stuff in the spreadsheets, we're doing stuff behind the scenes, we're getting new lights and everything. I've been neglecting my dynasty teams a bit. All right, I haven't been super active working the trades and stuff, and it's because it's just all kind of overwhelming. All right, I have a ton of teams. Some of them are rebuilding, some of them are contending. So I think it's really important, and I really urge you guys to do this as well. Every offseason, you should probably be charting your dynasty teams and just figuring out what the heck is my direction here, because I think that a lot of players run into the problem of trading to trade. And there's a lot of trades out there where you're just like, what's the goal here, man? You know what I mean? Like, this just feels lateral. Like, there's some guys out there that are just addicted to training or trading and are just making lateral moves across the board, just lighting money on fire, doing weird trades just to make trades. I think at the end of the day, you have to trade with a purpose. What problem are you solving here? Of course, if somebody's just giving you an offer where you think that you're getting a surplus of value, have at it. But for me, in analyst leagues, Patreon leagues where you guys have my rankings and everything, I'm not being offered the gift of just, mining value through trades. I need to be solving a problem. So because of that, I think it's important to chart your teams, assess your team, figure out, okay, is this an actual contending team? Can this team contend next year? If not, this needs to be a rebuilder, and just kind of slowly figure out the direction that you want to be pushing these teams in, so you have more of, an objective-based view of your teams in terms of trading and where you want your team to look like in August, in September. So we're going to go through 9 of my dynasty teams. I pretty much mapped out all of them, where they're at right now, how I feel about them, and what I want to change in the future. I think it'll be kind of a good exercise for me, myself, like kind of selfishly getting my shit together when it comes to these teams. But I also hope that you guys see this video and maybe do something similar for yourself. So with all of that being said, we're going to break down my dynasty teams, go to work, start to draw up how I can fix some of these and how we're just going to maintain with some of the other ones as well. As always, if you enjoy, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm critical. My nitty bag.
All right, so this is going to be a bit of a loaded screenshot, if I'm being honest with you guys. I mapped them all out in the Google Sheets. All right, now before I even tell you what team this is, where it's at, let's kind of break down what the heck is going on here. All right, we have a lot to go through. Now, first, I have each team broken down by position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and each of them are ordered roughly by their keep, trade, cut values. Keep, trade, cut is not perfect. It is just a way for me to order things so that, the ones that hold the most value are towards the top most of the time. Then I highlighted guys that I felt were soft sells or hard sells based on my team needs or just how I feel about the market. And then we have the team starting lineup. I think that's really important. That's right here, right? So we have QB3, QB38 as Kareem Hunt. And it just gives you a feel where you can kind of see, can this team win this year, right? Ideally, you want to have, a top 12 quarterback, a top 24 quarterback, top 12, top 24, top 12, top 24, top 36. You'd like your flexes to be a little bit better than 48 and 64 or whatever that might be. Your tight end, if it's elite, it should be somewhere in the top 5. But it's a good gauge to just, figure out where the heck you're at. And I think it's a really accurate use of ADP, or just a really accurate viewing of where your team is at for 2023. And this is using underdog ADPs, by the way, fellas. As always, if you haven't already, make sure you use promo code RON when you sign up on Underdog. They already have drafts going on. So this ADP that I'm using for all of these teams is from drafts that are happening this offseason. Rookies are going in these drafts. And it's as accurate as you could possibly get it. You can go out there. I'm trying to think of who might even have ADP at this point. I really couldn't name you a name, but maybe Sleeper has redraft ADP, but it's going to be a lot of auto drafting and stuff. There's actual real money on the line when it comes to these drafts. These are from Big Board ADP, which is a $10 to enter draft. I believe it closes once the NFL draft happens. It's a really good tournament. I have 30 plus entries in there at this point. And I think that there's some utility to use it for your dynasty teams to figure out, does the market like my team's odds in 2023? Now, I think that's pretty much it. No. We have, of course, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, like we just said. We have the starting lineup. We have the draft capital, so I have my picks listed here. And then we also have this. So this is the league format, just 12-team Superflex tight end premium PPR best ball. I know it's a mouthful, but it's pretty standard. And then we have Dynasty GM ranks. Now, I just happen to have a Dynasty Nerd sub. I don't really know why. I'm not going to sit here and say that their tool is perfect. I just think any league analyzer tool is probably something to be aware of. I don't think it's a Bible or anything, but it just gives you a rough view of where your team is at when it comes to just having overall dynasty value from your draft capital and young players, and then also your contending value. I know a lot of sites out there have dynasty value of your starters. That works too, but just a way to gauge, give or take probably 3 spots, right? So I would say it says 9th in dynasty value, anywhere from probably 12th to 6th. But it's at the end of the day, this is a pretty bad team, all right? We're in the back half of dynasty value. We're in the back half of contending. So I think it's important to have that. And then we also have the last thing I have listed here is previous points for finish, just so we sort of know where did this team end up last year. Now, with all of that being said, this is one of my least favorite teams. And it sucks because it's actually in probably my favorite league. It's in the Basement World Cup Best Ball Tournament. And what it is we have 2 leagues right now. It's a Patreon league. 2 leagues that are split up, and the top 6 teams go to the playoffs, and they actually face against each other in a total points sort of sprint in the playoff weeks, so that you have an overall prize winner where you're making more money than if you just won that one singular league. Now, I will say, it's at 2 right now. We're probably extending to 4 or 6. So anybody out there that's on the Patreon that's not in this league and you're interested, let me know. I'm probably going to make it more of an announcement in probably another month, maybe after the NFL draft, because we are looking to expand out the tournament to probably another 2 to 4 teams on top of our 2 to 4 leagues already on top of our 2 leagues. Now, this team isn't good. This is not a good team. This is probably one of the worst teams that you guys will see from me today. This is a team that is just really middle of the road. We finished 6th in points for. We have the 107, right? So it's just this team finished the worst team in the playoffs, right? So it's just almost in purgatory in a way. And I think this is a little bit of my flaw where in Dynasty, man, you got to be on top of your stuff in season. And if you look up and, even if you're limping into the playoffs and you're man, the issue with me is a lot of the times is if I'm limping into the playoffs, I'll still let it ride because you can get crazy stuff to happen, right? We had Mike Evans pop off. You had Jerick McKinnon in the playoffs, Cam Akers too. You have so much randomness that I'm almost down to limp in and see what happens. But there are also some times, like with this team, where that bites you pretty hard. I probably should have looked up, saw that this team wasn't great, scrapped things down, and maybe that 107 becomes, a 104 or something. Now, this team isn't great, right? We talked about it. 9th in dynasty value, 8th in contending value. This team needs to either nail this 107, this 207, and, hit them out of the park. Maybe we could mortgage our future, maybe trade a 24 first or something and try and win now. Or we can scrap things down, try and compete in 2024. And, maybe this team in another life where Kyler Murray doesn't have his ACL torn or whatever, we'd have 2 top 8 quarterbacks. We can probably just let it ride until the wheels fall off. Maybe get Quentin Johnston at the 107. Maybe trade a future second or something for a James Conner or a boring running back. And we could just sort of duct tape our way there. But I think we got to tear things down. I think that this team has to probably rebuild and look to 2024. And it sucks because I hate doing that. None of these guys that I have highlighted as sells either, right? So Lockett, Hurts, all of these guys, I don't think any of them in a vacuum are clear sells against the market. But in the context of this team, we don't want to score points. So the guys who are projected to score the most points on this team should probably be gone because we want to tank our 24 first. We want to get the 101 and 24, maybe get Caleb Williams up top there. And then also just sort of scrap the team, push assets into the future, don't score points, and then reload and contend in 2024. That's going to be the plan here. And I think first, I don't think Jalen Hurts is necessarily a sell, but I think in the context of this team, he is going to score a lot of points, right? He is the QB3 in underdog ADP right now. He is the 103 in startups, like at worst 105. I want to get a king's ransom. I think I had tried to get the 104 in 324 first, and I give Jalen Hurts in my 24 second. I don't think that'll happen. But I do think the 104 and 224 first for my Jalen Hurts is probably too cheap. So I'm trying to find the middle ground with that owner. But it is tough. But like I said, I want to get a king's ransom for Jalen Hurts. He probably has to get off the team by week 1, so I have plenty of time to move him. I'll probably get creative on rookie draft day or something. But he has to go. I'm not dying to get rid of Sam Howell. I'll actually probably let me get Jalen Hurts I think that he's a hard sell. By the way, like when you guys send me offers in these leagues, like this is a Patreon league, I'm just going to have like this pulled up and like the outline I just wrote pulled up, just to have it logged of like what the heck am I trying to do with this team, because you could just like look on Sleeper, look at this team and be like, you know what, this team has Jalen Hurts and stuff. We'll just sort of push things in, but when you zoom out and actually sort of diagnose it like this, things have to happen. Like I said, like I'll move off of Howell. If there's a Howell guy out there, fine. But I also don't mind. I think he's a fine upside swing to gain value. If he becomes like a top 15 dynasty quarterback, he could gain value for me. I also think Amon-Ra St. Brown and DK Metcalf are probably like relatively fine holds. They're young wide receivers. They'll probably give you fringe wide receiver 1 production. They'll be fine. But for my team, they're just going to lose dynasty value and score me points, right? They're both like top 15 wide receivers in redraft. If I can get sticker price for them, I'll happily move off of them, push draft capital forward, maybe take on, younger wide receivers or more of like project wide receivers, or I'd love like a rookie wide receiver. Like if I can move off for Amon-Ra St. Brown and get like JSN. Do you think you could do Amon-Ra St. Brown in a second for JSN in a first? Let me know if that might be on the table. I don't know. It really comes down to, of course, draft capital and everything, but I think that would be something fun. Like, I think on this team, I should probably try and load up on some rookie wide receivers, get rid of these guys who are going to score points. I think, of course, as well, like the older, more win-now type wide receivers, so Lockett, Smith-Schuster, Michael Thomas, Thielen. I'm going to see if I can sort of sway a contender with any of those pieces, maybe sort of cash out for like a future second. Anything that I can squeeze out of those guys. Again, I just don't want those points on my team. So that's this team. We're going to have to start scrapping things down. There is a lot to, put my hard hat on, get to work with this team. But this is a prime example, like I said, where you got to be on your P's and Q's in season. This is probably a learning moment for me with a team like this, where we did the startup last offseason. I thought, I could draft Jalen Hurts and a Kyler Murray and be good to go, ready to roll. Kyler Murray gets hurt. Things sort of fall off here. And maybe I could have pulled the plug. Maybe I could have added like 2 future firsts by selling off some assets. Maybe I could have turned my 107 into a 104, and I would be maybe in a spot where I could compete as soon as 2023 instead of 2024. So I think ripping that, what do you want to call it? That like emergency plug in season to sort of set the rebuild early so you don't have to wait a whole nother year, I think is I think is absolutely huge. I don't know why I struggled there. Now, our next team, too lazy to set lineups. This is a best ball dynasty league, Superflex PPR best ball dynasty league. It has Danny and Bush from Fantasy Stock Exchange. You have Notorious Fantasy in there, aka Nicholas, the man, the myth, the legend. And this team is much less of a fixer-upper than the last one, right? We have CMC, we have Justin Jefferson. Those are guys who are, RB1 and wide receiver 1 in their class. If you have Justin Jefferson and Christian McCaffrey on your team, you have to be competing. If not, then you need to be selling them. I'm fine, sort of competing with this team, right? We have the RB1 overall, the wide receiver 1 overall. We have a top 12 wide receiver in our wide receiver 2 spot, wide receiver 17 and wide receiver 3. Everything looks good. We're a little bit thin at flex, but it is a best ball team. It is a best ball team. We'll catch spike weeks. We have some spike weeks as well from running backs. Maybe we get like Deonta Foreman if Khalil Herbert was to go down. Zeke might punch in some touchdowns. This isn't an overwhelmingly good team, but I do think that it's just fine. It's not a powerhouse, but it should be in the mix this year. I will say no 23 firsts or 23 seconds is a bummer, but I don't really think the team has a youth problem, right? We have like McBride, Okonkwo. We have Rashad White, of course, Jefferson, Garrett Wilson. we have plenty of youth. This isn't a like dying roster or anything. Now, when we talk about the moves that I want to make with this squad, I think the only clear moves are to move on from Jared Goff. I've been very vocal that Jared Goff is a sell. I think that the Lions are going to draft a quarterback very soon here, wanting to move off from Jared Goff. I think that he's probably just a 1-year rental at this point. And, he's gained so much value where I got him essentially for free in the startup. And now he's like a top 6-7 round startup pick. In analyst leagues like that or like this, I don't know that I'll get sticker price for Jared Goff, but I want to look into selling him. Maybe there's somebody out there that needs a quarterback. I would like to sell him off. Like, of course, like I have Deshaun Watson, Rodgers, and Jimmy G here. I don't really need Goff. We also have McBride and Okonkwo. These are two guys at this point that are like top 16 tight ends in Dynasty. And to be honest, with Goddard, I don't really need them behind Goddard. So I am open to selling off them if I can kind of like strengthen up my flexes. I also would like an elite tight end. Like maybe I could bundle, like, I don't know. This is a junk offer. I'm going to be honest with you guys. This is a junk offer, but could like Jared Goff, Dallas Goddard, and then like one or two of McBride and Okonkwo get me into like the Kelsey conversation. I would entertain it. I don't know if that would be enough, but I think it wouldn't be all that far off. Maybe if there's like a rebuilder out there or something, or maybe not even a rebuilder, but just somebody who thinks Kelsey's old and wants to get off of him. I think Rachaad White could go. I think he's a little bit overpriced where the Bucs could draft somebody or sign a free agent or something, and right now his price is probably the highest it's been just because Leonard Fournette got cut, and I don't really like paying up for RB2 production, so I am okay moving on from him, but I'm not dying to move on from him. I think this is a team that is probably fine. We just have to make some savvy moves, again, like, selling Goff and getting points elsewhere, adding to the flex spots. But this should be a team that should be in the mix, in the playoffs, all of that good stuff. We finished second in points for last year. This is a fine team. And you'll find here, like, I think, I don't know what the demographic is in terms of my audience. Because sometimes I feel like, a lot of people that watch my videos just have maybe like 2 or 3 teams, but I think there's also some of you guys out there that have a crazy amount of volume. And there's really only so much time in a day, right? Like you can spend your time trading as much as you can across all of your leagues, but also I know you guys have lives, right? Where you have work and family and school or whatever. You got to divide your time up, I was going to say objectively, but like smartly, you know what I mean? If you only have so much time, so you should almost prioritize your leagues, where I think the team that we reviewed before this one is way more of a fixer-upper than this one. So I'm going to be spending more time trying to make trades and, tearing things down in that other league than I am just kind of like messing around and trying to get max value on Jared Goff and Rachaad White in this league. Now, after that, we have Twitter Dynasty Best Ball. This is one of my favorite teams. But this is also one of my favorite leagues. This is a Best Ball Dynasty league. Superflex, tight end premium, half PPR. This is an analyst league. I think I'm trying to rattle off the names that are in there. I believe it's like Ian over at Dynasty IM. I think you have Akash in there. Or no, I don't know that Akash is in there. I think Adeko's in there. I think Nelly is in there. I think Todd H is in there. There's a lot of guys in there that if you're kind of in the niche Dynasty space on Twitter, you'll know who these guys are. Jacob Sanderson, of course, is in there. And this is a fun team. This is one of my better teams, to be honest. We have top 12 guys pretty much across the board. And this is also a weirder best ball team or best ball format where it's one quarterback, or no, it's super flex, but it's one running back, 2 wide receivers, tight end. What's this, like 4 flex spots? So it's a little bit different where you don't have to have an RB2, which is nice because as somebody that is more of a 0 RB bro, you don't really have to have a ton of running backs. I will say, though, we've been drafting so well at running back that we now have a surplus of options here with like Kenneth Walker, Pollard, McCaffrey. But regardless, this team is good to go as a best ball team. Or you have Sean at QB1. We'll kind of just whoever has the better week between Daniel Jones and Derek Carr. We have McCaffrey, Walker, Pollard, Khalil Herbert, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Kirk, Hopkins, Renfro, Kittle, Njoku. We're getting points from everywhere. We're catching spike weeks everywhere. This is actually a league that we won last year. So, reigning champion, I would like to repeat. Now, when we talk about, you know, what to do with this team, you know, this is very clearly a playoff team, a dominant contender in my eyes. And it's just about maintaining at this point. And I think the only flaw in this team, or only clear flaw at this point, is a lack of like QB firepower, right? Deshaun is fine, but like Daniel Jones and Derek Carr as our QB2 isn't great, right? We want it to be much better. Like in a perfect world, like this is Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson, or Deshaun Watson and Justin Fields. It's just a matter of what I have to give up to get there. So I would love to find a way where, I mean, I like Daniel Jones, but I think he is a little bit overrated at this point. He was somebody that I got on this team for essentially for free in like the 10th round, and now he's, you know, similar to Jared Goff, where he's now like a 5th round startup pick. So if I could get near sticker price on him, again, it's going to be tough in an analyst league, but I would like to do that. I would be okay, you know, bundling up Daniel Jones. I think, like I said, this is only a one running back, you know, best ball league, and with McCaffrey already there, we don't really need Kenneth Walker and Tony Pollard. Like, I think even with this screenshot, we still have like Hunter Renfrow off to the side, and Njoku and a tight end premium will, you know, fill in there as well. I think I could pretty easily move off of one of them. I do wonder, do you think that I could go from, I also forgot to mention Christian Kirk as well mixing in there. Could I do Kenneth Walker and Daniel Jones and get into an elite quarterback? Could I? Is that on the table? I don't know. I would have to probably poke around a little bit, but I wonder if that could get me into the conversation. Again, we don't need as much RB firepower on this team. I also, of course, have Christian Kirk sort of highlighted. He's not a needle mover to me. He doesn't even really fit in the projected starting lineup. He'll get his spike weeks here and there, or he'll pop in my lineup here and there. He's probably fine on a best ball team, but he's a piece that I'm more than fine giving up on if somebody wants to, you know, put him in the back of a deal. Like if it's Daniel Jones, Kenneth Walker, and Christian Kirk for like Dak Prescott, would I be open to it? Or maybe not even Dak Prescott, but like, would that be enough to get into the Lamar conversation? Like I would do that probably. I don't know if it is enough to get into that conversation, but I would. Now, this is one of those teams as well. I could not lift a finger with this team and be pretty much fine with what this looks like week 1 in September. I'm kind of nitpicking with like Daniel Jones and stuff, but I think, you know, I think I could be a little bit more smart about how I'm allocating roster value with Daniel Jones, these running backs, Christian Kirk, and I'd rather have that value tied up in another elite quarterback. But, you know, if only isn't just for cherries and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas, as I think that was like my freshman year math teacher would always say that. So I don't know. In a perfect world, that would make sense, but I don't know in an analyst league I'll get that return for that package. Now, our next league, an OG Patreon league, this was probably started in like 2020 or 2021, and I took down the chip last year. This team is a wagon. This team is a wagon. Like we started out a little bit bumpy with the Basement World Cup. This team is crazy. You know, we're first in Dynasty, first in contending. We had 4th in points for, but I made a pretty nice trade to get Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey at the end there. And now we're just ready to just, like at this point, when you have a team like this, the goal should just be maintain, and just find a way so that you are contending every single year. That should be the goal. In my eyes, if you can just make the playoffs, if you have, say, 5 leagues or 10 leagues, you can make the playoffs in all of those leagues, you're going to end up with a championship in at least one of them. It's just how the math works. So your goal should be making playoffs across the board and just maintaining that into the future, right? I think some people like sort of like, I don't know, you know, something like sticks out. It's like, oh, this doesn't look right. I'm just going to tear it down and rebuild and everything. Just look, if your team is good, just keep winning games and trying to get a return on investment from those buy-ins that you've been burning. But this is a crazy team, right? We have top 12 options everywhere. We have McCaffrey, Derrick Henry. We have Jalen Hurts up top, Brown, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, like 4 top 12 wide receivers through the flex, wide receiver 13, wide receiver 16. The only weak parts really here, or weak points here, and we don't even have, the funny part is like, on this team, like we're not even starting DJ Moore, we're not even starting Brandon Ayuk. Like we have guys, Pacheco, like off the bench, not even starting, that are good to go. And then on top of that, we have 2 firsts, right? We have the 104, we have the 112. So we have a lot going on here. Now, I think the play here, we don't have a first in 2024. We just have a 2nd and a 5th. I think the move is probably to find a way to push some of this draft capital into 2024. I'd like to get a 2024 first. I don't know. I just want a first in every year to get a shot at, an upside swing on youth, especially here when, like, you're contending and you're so I mean, this isn't over the top veteran heavy, right? Because we have guys like Garrett Wilson and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Devonta Smith, but we also have McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Devontae Adams, who could sort of crumble at any minute here. And I think really the only weak spots are the onesies, right? So we have David Njoku, and we have our QB2 here as Geno Smith / like Kyler Murray. Those two could definitely get better. Like, I'm open. I don't think Kyler Murray is necessarily a sell, but I think if you're a contender, I think that he's a decent sell where I think it's worth asking around to see what you could add to a Kyler to get into, the Lamar, Lawrence, Herbert, Burrow, Jalen Hurts, any of those guys conversation, because you want points. You can't really wait until, like, especially off the ACL, a guy who rushes so much like Kyler, I don't think that he'll be an elite quarterback for your team until, say, 2024, right? So if you're a contending team that wants to win now, and you have a surplus of value like this team does, you might be in a spot where you could, just add a little bit of juice to Kyler and get into another elite quarterback. I think, I could bundle Kyler. Maybe, like, Kyler in the 104 might get me into something crazy, if I'm being honest with you. Similar idea with, like, Kelsey, Andrew, Pitts. If I could maybe add a piece to Njoku, like, could Njoku in the 112 get me into Kelsey? I don't know. Maybe could Njoku and Okonkwo in the 112 get me into Kelsey? I don't know, but, like, you know what I mean? Like, those kind of moves where it's kind of bundling up, upgrading, just sort of upgrading your starting lineup just to make things even more dominant. I think guys as well, like McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Devontae Adams, we talked about them. Like, I'm not dying to sell them. Nobody's going to buy them for sticker price. They're probably just going to, retire on this team. But regardless, this is a stacked team. I pray for all the patrons that are in here. I'm going for the repeat. I'm sorry about it. All right, that's a nasty team. This is probably my best team that I have going on here. Now, our next team is Dear Ryan and Joe. Thank you. Another Patreon league. Pretty much the exact same format here, and I don't think this is as pretty. If I'm being honest here, this is a much, much worse team. We finished last. We got the 101. And this is probably a spot that a lot of your guys' teams are in. You're sitting here looking at an empty roster. You have the 101. You've successfully done the tank. Now what? And that's where we're at with this team. And my philosophy in Dynasty has changed since, I first started making videos. At first, I was, like, infatuated with the, what do they call it? The productive struggle, right? Like, coming out, tanking right away, just making a monster down the road. I'm going to be honest with you guys, man. That's cool. And there's something to it. I think there was an edge at one point. I think there was an edge because you could the trades weren't adding up. The trade value you could get from trading back was just insane. But if you're now in sharp leagues, no one's going to give you a king's ransom for, the 104 in the first round. Like, you can maybe get good market value, but trading back I don't think is as plus EV as it used to be. And there's also something to be said about competing every year that you have a buy-in at stake. All right, you're most of the time you're paying 2 buy-ins up front. That means you're paying like 3 buy-ins before you're ever even like trying to contend. That's a hole you're putting yourself inside of. Like I said earlier, like, I think the move should really be is that unless if your team is awful and you have to tear everything down, you should just be trying to make the playoffs every single year, winning that way. And I think that's sort of what gets lost with, like, tanking, and you just want your team to look pretty and you want to look at all the rookie picks and stuff. I think on the other side, you can build teams. One of the teams I won last year, it's not featured here because it's a Devi team. You can draft a team in year one and just win out the gate, and it doesn't have to be like a bunch of old people. Like, I think we started our draft with Trey Lance and Deshaun Watson. It wasn't that pretty, but we have plenty of future value on the team. We went in for year one. We won in year one, and now you have, a good team. If you won your league, your team is probably pretty good. Your team's in a good spot, and you can kind of make moves on the fly to maintain that. So I say all of that to say, I don't know that, like, deliberately tanking, like in the startup, like, just giving up right away, I don't think is a great move if you're playing at volume. Like, just go out there and try and win. Like, I don't know. Of course, you can tank on your own terms, and I've seen it done before. You tank year one and you go right around in year two and you become a contender. You can do that. I think that's actually a pretty sharp way to go about things. But you could also just win in year one and not have to have your hands tied behind your back for a whole year. So what I'm trying to say is I think tanking is probably a minus EV across the board. But if you're going to tank, you should really only be doing that for 1 year. My goal personally is if I'm tanking, you tank for that 1 year, and then right around the corner that next season, you're not going all in, but you should now be making the playoffs and having a good team. You should have, accumulated enough roster value to now do that. And the issue is here. I don't think we have enough after 1 year of rebuilding to go all in and win. All right, we're 6th in Dynasty value, which is okay. But when you're looking at this team and you have the 101, that's also something else that's huge. If you have the 101, you could not just simply take Bijan Robinson no matter what. And what I mean is, if you're on the clock and you're picking a player at 101, it has to be Bijan Robinson. But if you're not ready to compete, you need to get Bijan Robinson the hell off your team. You need to sell the 101. You need to get a king's ransom for the 101, because the issue is with Bijan is he's a running back, right? And he's a very good running back. He's already having like a top 5 ADP on Underdog. Like, he is going to be out the gates pushing for 18 plus points per game. And if you aren't ready to take that on and win games, you're wasting a lot of value, because he's scoring points for your team. He's making your draft pick in 2024 worse than it could be. And then also, running backs have a short shelf life. These guys get hurt, right? Travis Etienne got hurt in preseason. Like, these guys get hurt. They are liabilities. Jonathan Taylor this past year. Running backs get hurt across the board. So you're taking on a lot of risk. And if you don't need his points, there's not a ton to gain, right? We saw like running backs right now, not a lot of them are going in the first round of startups. Bijan is the RB1 in all of Dynasty. Cashing out right now before he comes onto your roster and, I'm not saying he's going to get hurt or anything. I'm just saying that he is someone who's going to really front load his points as a running back, right? Like, his first 4 years are going to be the most valuable years of his career from a dynasty standpoint, from a fantasy standpoint. So if you aren't ready to take on those points and take on 18 plus points per game, he needs to be gone. And when I'm looking at this team, I don't think it's ready because, we have no running backs, right? This is 0 RB, so McKinnon, Keontae Ingram, Kyler coming off the ACL. The wide receivers are just Devonta Smith, Jameson Williams, Deontay Johnson, and a whole bunch of nothing. We do have 3 firsts, right? We have the 101, 102, 107. I don't think that puts me over the top to win this year. So this is a team where, like the first one, is a little bit of a mistake, right? So across the board, I have some teams that are really, really dominant. Some of them aren't. It's just tough across the board to have, I'd love to show you just like a massive amount of juggernauts, but I think it's honestly more important for you guys to see, these more fixer-up type teams. And this is a team where I think that we're going to have to refuel here and get back to it in 2024, right? We have Kyler, who is going to gain value naturally from coming back from his ACL tear. Trey Lance is a nice upside value swing. He's probably like a 4th rounder right now in startups. He comes out here and balls out. He could easily be a, top 20 startup pick. Jameson Williams is a nice upside swing too. I think it's one of the few spots where I'm fine holding on to Jameson Williams. When we talk about sells here, of course, 101's a sell. I have this as a hard sell. I need to find a way, before there is 0 seconds left on the clock to get rid of that 101. I think Devonta Smith isn't a bad sell for me either. He's only getting older at this point. He's, a top 15 wide receiver in ADP. I'm cool just getting those points off of my team. If anybody out there wants to pay sticker price for Devonta Smith, ideally we sort of, trade off of the 101, maybe get some picks in 2024. I would love to have like 3 2024 draft picks or 3 2024 firsts. You have the 102 and the 107 I have as like soft sells. I'm open to it, right? Like, I could trade back. I don't love the 102 pocket just because I think like 102 through 104 right now, all about the same. Like, Bryce Young, Stroud, Anthony Richardson are all back-to-back for me. Of course, I could change after the draft, but I'm fine moving off the 102. I'm fine moving off the 107. I just don't feel a ton of pressure I don't feel a ton of pressure to sit on the clock and, sit in the pocket and make a pick, but I also don't feel a ton of pressure to sell those picks for pennies. And if I'm selling these picks as well, I think one of the things that I would have done in the past, and I think it's a mistake now, I talk about this all the time, but, I think in the past, I would have used, the 101 and 102 to, maybe get, a first next year. Maybe the 102, I would get, a first next year and, a sexy year 2 wide receiver. So maybe, I would be open to it, but maybe like a 24 first for the 102 in like Drake London or like Garrett Wilson or something. The issue is I think, especially in Garrett Wilson's case, I have a lot of Garrett Wilson and I like Garrett Wilson, but I think like his value is getting very, very steep at this point, and there's not a lot of room for gain, right? But when you take a guy, the 102 is a bad example, but like the 107, there's a lot of value to gain there. Like you were taking what? You took Chris Olave last year, like the 108, 109, and now he's a fourth round startup pick. So you almost want to lean into more of those opportunities, right? Like you want to lean into as much upside as possible on these rebuilding teams. You don't really want to buy at the top of like blue chip stocks of like, your Garrett Wilsons and your Jalen Waddles and your T. Higgins and stuff. Even though inherently on rebuilders, you think to yourself, let's get draft picks, let's get young wide receivers. That's something I used to think, and I still think that it's fine to have young wide receivers. Like I think Jameson Williams is a good example of that. But I don't know that it makes sense to move off of draft picks to have a lot of room to gain value. And on top of that, to even have a lot more insulation in their rookie year, right? Like George Pickens didn't do a ton, and he's still like a top 20, 25 dynasty wide receiver. So what I'm trying to say here is if you're going to move off of your draft picks on a rebuilder, don't trade them for sure things, because you need to lean into situations where you're getting the most value gain that you could possibly have in Dynasty. Now, after that, we have the Founding Fathers. And this is, if I'm correct, I believe this is the first ever Dynasty League that we did. And this team is with patrons. I believe, like I said, the original Patreon, the Founding Father Dynasty League. And this is a good team. This team came in second last year. And it was only 6 in points for, but it kind of heated up during the end as like a 0 RB, like Khalil Herbert, Tony Pollard. I'm trying to think of the other guys that sort of flashed down the stretch here, but nothing sticks out. Like I was going to say Ayuk was pretty decent down the stretch. I know that he had like a fine little stretch. Kittle down the stretch was nice. But yeah, this is a good team. It has a lot of value, right? So it's first in dynasty value. I think this is a team I could have pushed the chips in if I wanted to, but I didn't. And maybe that burned me by, getting the second place prize or whatever it was in this league. But this is a team that I think is pretty good on paper, right? It's a little bit weak at quarterback. This is another, like all my quarterback rooms feel the same, where it's some combo of like Deshaun Watson, Jared Goff. I was scooping Jared Goff last year when he was dirt cheap in startups. Although this wasn't a startup team. I don't know how I ended up with Jared Goff on this team. But it's like some combination of like Watson, Kyler, Goff, Trey Lance, Ryan Tannehill. So we have Deshaun Watson. We have Jared Goff. Jared Goff, to me, like I said, clear sell. We said it earlier. He's somebody that I'll be moving off of in most spots if I can find somebody that wants him. And I think that on this team, it's a clear playoff team. It's a clear team that can contend, right? Like the running backs aren't great, but it is like a 0 RB-ish type team. Top 12 running back, like an RB30 type with Khalil Herbert, I think is absolutely fine. Quarterback's a little bit weak here, but we have, Chase, Higgins, Debo, Kittle, Drake London, Godwin, Ayuk, and then like off the bench, you still have, I was expecting to say better names than Jacoby Myers and Michael Thomas and Chase Claypool, but it's still, to me, I would call it a pretty strong team at this point. And I would say that this team is probably fine if I head into week 1 with it as is. Ideally, we use the 104 on, I could use it on one of the big 3 QBs and go out there and get some value gain in the quarterback department, whether that's Bryce Young, Stroud, Anthony Richardson. I think that's probably this team's biggest weakness is QB2, so I'm fine with that. I'm also down, like, if I could do the 104 and Jared Goff and get into the Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields conversation, I would love that. But maybe I have to add in like a Brian Robinson, or I have to add in my 111. I'd still be open to that as well. I don't mind as a team that's like trying to win. I don't mind, instead of, rolling the dice on one of those rookie quarterbacks, paying a little bit extra to get proven, elite assets in that department. And then we also have Brian Robinson, who I guess I did reference in terms of that trade. But Brian Robinson, to me, is a little bit overvalued, where he is kind of benefiting from just being the RB1 on the depth chart in the offseason. I don't think he was all that special last year. Didn't love him as a prospect. He was an old prospect. To his benefit of the doubt, if you will, he did play last year with a bullet wound or whatever. So maybe, the inefficiency and everything last year was just because of that. And I'm open to that. And I don't think there's going to be people jumping to buy Brian Robinson off of me. So if he stays on the team, that's fine. This is a 0 RB team anyways, and I think that this is a fine like RB core to get me through. And maybe we get maybe we get some running backs like 211, 309. This is a stacked running back class to the point where I haven't touched on it yet. But like all of these picks, like anything past like the 205, man, I just want to hammer. Like you guys see how I like to build teams. Like I almost have as many running backs as wide receivers. I just want dart those at running back. I would love if the 211, 309, 411, 511 like all just became, I'm trying to think of like names here, but if they all just became like, I don't know, like Kendre Miller, and I'm trying to think of who would like Evan Hull and Keaton Mitchell or Deuce Vaughn and like all of those guys. I would love to just stack up those names, add them to the taxi squad at running back and hope that they hit and end up being this year's. I'm trying to think of who were the guys. I mean, like you could sort of say Tyler Algier, but he was a little bit more expensive than you would have liked. But like Khalil Herbert, his rookie year, those type of guys. Chuba Hubbard, his rookie year, guys who just come in, give you like nice top 24 production that you essentially got for free in the rookie draft pick or in the rookie draft altogether. Now, like I said, this team I think is pretty much fine, but if I can find a way to get a second elite quarterback next to Deshaun Watson, I think that's the goal here. After that, we have our 8th team. This is the Mickey Mouse League. This is an analyst league. Came in 3rd last year, 2nd in points for. This is an analyst league with pretty much a bunch of the same analysts that I mentioned last time. This is going to be like I think Danny's in there. I think Akash is in there. I think Jacob Sanderson's in there. It's ran by, I'm trying to think, it might be ran by Ian, which is Dynasty_IM on Twitter. So we have a lot of stuff going on in here. This is a really competitive league. This is a team that is going to be competing every year. If you have Mahomes on your team, I think one of the crazy things you can do, unless if you're talking about like a team that is bottom of the barrel, if you have Mahomes, if you have Josh Allen, if you have, the QB1 in all of fantasy in a Superflex league, the wins above replacement and like the value above replacement that you're getting out of that elite quarterback is so massive. Don't tank with him on your roster. And unless if you are getting, like if you are selling Mahomes for ticket, like, sticker price, you're selling too low. Someone had to absolutely blow me away to get Patrick Mahomes off of this team. He'll probably just retire on this team. I cannot stress enough, when you have a Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes on your roster, do not mess around. Do not sell for, this trade calculator says it's about even. Like, you know what? Why not? Like, that is a catastrophic mistake if you find ways to get players like that impact wins so much and hold so much dynasty value off of your team without really tipping the scale in your favor. Now, this is a competing team. We have top 12 options anywhere. Like we have Mahomes, we have Taylor, Saquon, Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson, like top 10 options through those. We have Christian Watson, Tyler Lockett, Miles Sanders, top 30-ish, top 24 options in the flex. Really our only weakness is, like with a lot of these teams, is quarterback 2 with Aaron Rodgers and David Njoku at tight end. So those are the spots that I'm down to get stronger at, but I also don't think that I don't feel a ton of pressure to get stronger there. Now, in order to sort of like upgrade either of those 2 spots, I'm open to trading Miles Sanders. I'm open to trading George Pickens. I'm open to trading the 108 if I have to. Miles Sanders, to me, he's now like RB 20-ish on keep trade cut after moving to the Panthers. I don't love it. We talked about it yesterday, but his previous career high, he had 11 total touchdowns last year. Previous career high was 6. He benefited a lot from that offense last year, from the efficiency of Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. He now goes to a waiver situation. Teams might just stack the box against a rookie quarterback in Carolina with Adam Thielen as your wide receiver 1. So efficiency could fall off. The touchdowns could fall off. They might view Chuba Hubbard as their pass-catching running back. So there's not a lot of outs for Miles Sanders at his current price. But in an analyst league like this, no one's going to be jumping for joy to get Miles Sanders off of my hands. I think Pickens as well is a good one where he's more of a youth guy. And I have Garrett Wilson, I have Christian Watson. I already have a decent chunk of youth already. I think I could stand to move off of George Pickens if someone wants to pay, his exact ADP type price. He's not getting in the flex or anything. I'm completely fine moving off of him if that is on the table, I'm very curious to know what it would take to add on to George Pickens to then go and get a Devontae Adams or Cooper Kupp, because that's what I'd be interested in. I don't think it takes Pickens in the 108. Maybe Pickens in a 2024 second gets me into, Devontae Adams or Cooper Kupp. I think so. I think really the goal is here, finding a way to move off of Pickens and get myself a 20-point per game score at whatever position that bit may be. Tight end, flex, wide receiver, anything that I could figure out. Again, like 108 too, but I don't feel a ton of pressure with 108. I actually love, like, the reason why we talked about earlier, like, if I don't have a first in 2024, I want a first in every single year, because it's just a good way. Like, you can hit on pretty crazy upside. It's why I'm never dying to, like I said, just like move off of a late first. Like, I think a move that I would have been advocating for last year was moving off of a late first for like Marquise Brown. And that's rarely a great thing, because Marquise Brown, yes, he's going to compete for you and he's more of a sure thing, but the value gain isn't really there. Like, the upside with the 112 or 111 or a late first, it doesn't seem all that pretty. But last year it could have been Christian Watson. And Christian Watson's what now, like a 4th, 5th round startup pick, whereas like probably the 112 or 201, wherever you got him last year, was probably what, like a 9th, 10th. There's so much more room to gain on those assets than trading for just something that doesn't have a lot of room to improve, right? Like an older, proven asset. I think that's one of the worst ways you can spend the first, is on a proven asset at like wide receiver or something. I think if you're going to trade off of a first, it should probably be for either 20 points per game on a contending team, or it should be for an elite quarterback or elite tight end. So you're getting some leverage in one of those, onesie positions. Now, what else we got here? This is another team that doesn't need a ton of fixer-upping. Like, that's pretty much, like, this is me nitpicking here. If I rolled in with Miles Sanders and George Pickens this year on week 1, plus whoever I take at 108, I think that's absolutely fine. Now, our last team here is my longest running Dynasty league. This is a random league. I hope that nobody in this league watches this video. This is the League of Mediocre Gentlemen. This is a league that I joined when I first started playing Dynasty. I made a ton of mistakes. I think I came out the gate and drafted like 6 running backs up top, like Miles Sanders, J.K. Dobbins. It was ugly. I have now been essentially like just paying for the mistakes that I've made in the past, but I've been a man on a mission. I'm not one that abandons leagues really often. I'm going to see it through. I at least want to get this team in a good spot before I leave it. Like, at this point, it's really only worth it for me to play Dynasty if it's a Patreon or an analyst league, just for, networking purposes and just for the fun, because random Reddit Dynasty leagues, like, they're okay. But, you just find, unless you have, like, a absolute beauty of a commish, things fall apart. Like, it takes forever to get an orphan filled. It's why I haven't, we're going through 9 of my 11 Dynasty teams here. One of them is Devi. I didn't want to go through a Devi team. And then the other one is the Crazy Ambassador video. We're going on a bit of a tangent here. But I've been getting questions about the Crazy Ambassador team. How's the Crazy Ambassador doing? When are we going to get that next video? Here's the issue, man. These Reddit leagues are awful. I am doing everything in my power to keep this league together every single offseason. The commissioner is like, I don't know. I don't want to badmouth the commissioner. He is pretty lazy, right? So like we've had a team that needs a owner that is an orphan for so long now, and he hasn't filled it. And I told him last year, I'm like, dog, please make it so people have to pay 2 years up front so that we don't have teams orphaning every single year. And he wouldn't do it. It's just very, very frustrating. I'm sure a lot of you guys out there, if you have leagues with randoms, it's annoying. So the league right now, the Crazy Ambassador League right now, isn't even like figured out. We're still waiting for an owner in there. I'm not making a ton of deals in there. I'm trying to think what the heck my point was. But yeah, Crazy Ambassador, of course, video series or whatever. So I'll always try and keep that alive. I think once the NFL draft happens, once it's more rookie draft season, I'll definitely make a video on the Crazy Ambassador team. But just know it's still out there. The league is just it's hanging on by a thread. But I'm doing everything in my power to keep things together here. But this is another Reddit team. Again, this is one that I started when I first started Dynasty, and this was a team that I was trying to tank. And we missed out on Bijan Robinson. We came in last in points for, but it's max points for, and we lost by not a ton in max points for. So a huge bummer. But this is still a team that I've been tanking, and I think that this is a team where we're going to turn things around and compete in 2023. This year, we're going to start wheeling and dealing. I think this is one of the teams that it's good to actually get a look at, because we're looking here. The quarterbacks aren't great, actually, but the wide receivers are solid here. We have like Garrett Wilson, T. Kirk, Ayuk, Dotson. We have Kirk off the, or no, not Kirk off the bench, but we have like Rashad Bateman, Jacoby Myers, Elijah Moore off the bench. We have a lot going on. All I really need is running backs, a QB2 that has his ACL intact, and like a 20-point per game scorer, and this team is good to go. So I think the first play here is to see again. Kyler, to me, isn't a clear sell, but if you're a team that's trying to compete and you don't really have time to wait for Kyler to come back to health or, be himself again, I really think it's interesting to see what you can add to a Kyler to get into the rest of the elite quarterbacks. Like if there's a rebuilder out there, a guy who's very clearly trying to tear his team down, let's say he has like a Jalen Hurts, see what you can add to Kyler to get to Jalen Hurts, right? Because he doesn't want those points on his team, and Kyler Murray is almost one of the best bets to get back to being a first-round pick in startups. Now, after that, that's where it gets a little bit weird because I'll have to do some wheeling and dealing with the 102 and the 103. I don't really want to just sit on the clock and take, let's say, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. Now our quarterback room is Kyler, Deshaun, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. I just don't think that's a wise use of roster value. I like to spread that out across other positions, especially when our running backs are so weak, if that makes sense. So I would love to, if I could find a way to use these draft picks to get into like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, seeing what I could add to them. Cheaper options like, of course, Kupp, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, running backs. Like, I think Eckler, Derrick Henry, and Nick Chubb for contending teams aren't terrible guys to go kick the tires on, especially if you're in like a sicko Patreon league or something like that, or where guys aren't valuing running backs. I think if you could get those guys for cheap, I think that would be a great haul. And I don't mind. The only reason I have like Garrett Wilson, T. Higgins highlighted is I don't mind if I have to use one of these guys, one of these, shiny wide receivers to get into the Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson area. I'll happily do it. But I'll say more likely are these guys getting dealt if I have to put any of these guys on top. I don't mind, going from Elijah Moore and Rashad Bateman and sort of paying up for your Devontae Adams, your Cooper Kupps, if I could find a way to add to either one of those. If I could find a way to do the same thing with, if somebody wants, Christian Kirk or Jacoby Myers, they are welcome to have that. So we have a lot to do with this team. This is a team that I have to start flipping around now. Pretty much from now through the rookie draft, through week one of the NFL season. By week one of the NFL season, I want this team to be good to go to make the playoffs. So this is one of the teams that I'll be having to allocate a lot more time than, say, a team that is a little bit more stacked, like I showed you earlier, where there is a lot to be done with this team, but there's a lot of roster value, right? We have 102, 103, 111, 112. Absolute bummer that I had 4 2023 firsts and 2 of them are 111 and 112, but I don't know. I guess having the 102 and 103 makes up for that. So again, a ton to get done with this team, but I think we have a nice little foundation in place for what the blueprint is. And when we talk about just sort of what we just did, right? We went through all of those teams, we mapped everything out. I think it's really important for everybody to do, even if it's not in this sort of over the top, like spreadsheet type way. You don't just want to be so micro within your league where you're just like, oh, this team made the playoffs last year. Like, let's just keep blindly making the playoffs, or the same thing with like tanking. Like, this team have been accumulating picks. I think sometimes with a lot of rebuilding teams is you romanticize how pretty it looks, right? Where you maybe have like 624 first and you have like 3 firsts in 2023 and you're like, oh, this is beautiful. Like, this is going to be so sexy down the line once everything falls into place. But if you look in let's say you're like first in dynasty value and like 12th in contending, you should be bundling up those picks and just competing now. You already have so much value. There's no reason to burn another buy-in on fire. Just start competing. Like, yes, you're not getting the absolute realized value of those picks, but it's really important to evaluate like a rebuilding team and be like, wait a minute. Like, this team is a sleeping giant. I'm almost doing the rest of the league a favor by not pushing the chips in and trying to compete this year. So it's just something important to realize, where don't get so caught up in what you've been doing with your team. Kind of find a way to map out your team, zoom out, look at it objectively, and then sort of figure out what you want to do, where you really stand in that league. Now, that is going to do it for us today. This is more of I don't know what you want to call this video. It's kind of philosophical. It was honestly a selfish video. I wanted to do that all offseason. I haven't gotten around to it, so now I finally have a blueprint of what the hell I want to do with these teams. which is beautiful. So I hope that you guys gain something from this, but I think just talking through this and mapping this out has done a ton for me as a Dynasty player today. So now when you guys are offering me trades in these leagues and everything, I know what the heck my goal is, right? Like if you did that like right after the week after Super Bowl, I'd be like, I don't know. Unless if I'm getting clearly getting overpaid for one of my players, I'm like, dude, like I don't know what I even want to do with this team. Unless if it's clear and blatant, like this team's going to compete or whatever. But that's all for today. Don't really have anything to push. We talked about Underdog, of course. Promo code Ronnie if you're not already on Underdog. They'll match your deposit all the way up to $100. Hop in the big board. It's like pretty much the most fun I'm having right now in terms of like redraft fantasy. You can draft teams already right now, just $10 a pop. It doesn't take a ton of time to get through those drafts, and I think there's a lot of value to be gained where there's a huge edge where a lot of the guys on there really aren't up to date with Dynasty and who these guys are. Like what the hell is a Jalen Hyatt or a Zach Evans or a Sean Tucker? They're just in there trying to draft like Derrick Henry in the third round and laughing all the way to the bank with that pick. So there's a lot of value there. Make sure you check it out. UnderdogFantasy.com. There should be a link down below in the description. There'll be a link down below in the comments. You click it, it'll take you there. Use my promo code. They'll match your deposit up to $100. Now, if you made it this far, I love you. Thank you. And I will see y'all in the next one.
I got the juice, I got the juice.
Channel, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoena from Mr. Meaner.